In this video, I rank every single Resident Evil game that's ever come out. Some of my takes might be a little spicy, so do stick around and let me know what you think. Okay, starting off with Resident Evil 4 Remake. Ooh. This basically sets the standard for the rest of the list, but it's an S tier. Starting off with an S tier, Jesus. It's the most recent Resident Evil game, and it's just amazing. I loved this game. It was a fantastic reimagining and just really hit the nail on the head. Fleshed out the whole story and all the characters. Recreated pretty much the whole action feel, with also a touch of horror, which I really enjoyed. It was nearly a perfect remake, so it deserves S tier. Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles. Ooh. Okay, I was a fan of the Resi Light Gun games for the Wii. Umbrella Chronicles, though, it was interesting. It had a bit more backstory to Resident Evil 0 and Resi 1, but it more or less just replayed Resi 0. I thought some things in were pretty cool, like the Ivan Tyrant, that was cool. He had sunglasses, so, you know, he's cool. Overall, though, I think it goes into a C. Resident Evil Survivor. That was the first ever Resident Evil first-person game way back on the PlayStation 1. It was more of an arcade experience. It's a one-take playthrough. It was interesting. I had a few multiple choice paths. It's canon technically because it was mentioned in the Resident Evil 0 intro. The voice acting, though, is abysmal. But that makes it funny. That really does make it funny. I did like it, though. It's a fun little game, but I'd say it goes into C as well. Operation Raccoon City. Controversial take. I like Operation Raccoon City. It's a fun multiplayer game if you have some friends to play with, and yeah, it's not a canon game, but it's like an interesting what-if scenario nearly. Also, spoiler, you can kill Leon and Claire in it, which is kind of funny and weird. But if you do have friends, it's a good little action game. I just wish I had friends to play with. Overall though, it's gonna go... I'm gonna put it in B, just because I like it. I like that little shooty shoot game. Revelations 2, okay, this is... confession time, people. I haven't finished Revelations 2. I've played a decent bit of it, never finished it. I don't know why. I did like it though, because it's a Claire story. Claire's obviously a badass. We got to see Barry again. It's Wesker's sister instead of Wesker this time, and it's set like around the events of Resi 6. Well, it's not related to Resi 6, but you get references to it. I can't actually rank it though, because I've not finished it. Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles. I think this is actually a hidden gem in the Resident Evil series, to be honest. This is actually a canon game which focuses around Operation Javier. Leon, Krauser are in it, they're both teamed up. And it's actually got some really gorgeous cutscenes. Now, I will say it does drag a little bit around the areas where you have to go through all of Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica again. But still, even if they dragged, I still found them fun. See, I have a little bias too, because this is like the second game I ever played in Resident Evil. I'll put it in A. I liked Darkside Chronicles. Resident Evil 3 Remake. As a remake, it's a no, but I like Resident Evil 3 Remake. It's fun. It's a good little action game if you're looking for one. While he is a bit scripted, Nemesis does scare the bejesus out of me. It does have amazing acting. A lot of the shots in it are also gorgeous, even if we didn't get, like, a lot. They cut down, like, the scale of it from the original game, which I didn't personally like. I was fine with all the new transformations for Nemesis. I thought those boss fights were cool, but I didn't enjoy that they cut out areas. Still, love the game. Love the game. Saying that, it goes into a B tier, because I do actually enjoy it. I've played it a copious amount of times. Resident Evil Outbreak, another one I haven't actually played. I really want to get into it. I have it on my PS2, I just need to sit down and properly go through it. I feel like the experience though is really meant to be online, but I don't actually have access to any online things for PlayStation 2, so... I will sit down and play it at some point though. Well, it looks interesting, can't grade it, unfortunately. Big sag. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. For anybody that knows me, this is probably my second favorite Resident Evil game of all time, so instantly it's going to S tier. It's actually the Resident Evil game that still gives me the most anxiety in the best way possible. It's a Jill game. Jill Valentine, if you don't know, is my favorite Resident Evil character. Nemesis is probably one of my favorite bioweapons in all of Resident Evil. Even though he is scripted in it, it does feel like he has a lot of free roam to him. And when those footsteps come thudding towards you and you hear the stars, I shit myself. Overall, it's a great story. It's a good expansion onto Resident Evil 2, more or less, being that it takes place like a day before and a day after. It also was just interesting because we got a proper look into like the effects around Raccoon City. But yeah, S tier, S tier. Resident Evil Mercenaries 3D. Oh, I love Mercenaries in Resident Evil. I don't think there's a bad Mercenaries in Resident Evil. This is the 3DS version, which I actually have on hand here. This game is fun if you want a portable Mercenaries experience. Saying that, you can also play Mercenaries now on the Switch with Resident Evil 4 and 6 both having it. But if you have a 3DS, this is definitely worth a little pickup. It was not worth its like $60 price tag when it came out, but I picked it up for 10 at like a secondhand store, so it's fun. If you just want a little short Mercenaries experience on the go, I'd recommend it. But this is not me shilling out, this is me giving a ranking. I'll give it a C, because it's a good Resi game. It's not the one you think of though when, like, off the top of your head. Resi 2 Remake, instant S tier. Fantastic remake. Scared the living shit out of me. Also has an extremely fun speedrun. I just love the story of Resi 2, and the remake does so much justice to the original. Pure horror gore fest is all I can say. Nick Apostolides and Stephanie Panisello as Leon and Claire. Just perfect casting, and it just fleshed out the whole story a lot more, especially certain characters like Marvin Branagh. Mr. X, also one of my favorite bioweapons now, thanks to this game specifically. I like his top hat. Resi 5. Okay, might be controversial, but A tier. I love Resi 5. It's more or less Resident Evil 4 2. I love Chris, I love Sheva. Sure, it's purely an action game. It was like a big step away from the horror of Resident Evil. But if you think about it, there's been no co-op action game that's been as good as Resident Evil 5. I think, yeah, the story's good. Doesn't feel like the classic Resi games, but I still enjoyed it. I also kind of hope we get that remake. Next up is Resi 6. I liked Resi 6. I know it's controversial again. 4 campaigns was a bit messy, but I did like it. I especially liked the Sherry and Jake one because it was a really interesting campaign. Just because Jake being the son of Wesker, Sherry being the daughter of William. The two biggest bad guys in the entire Resident Evil series, and just their children are trying to prevent all the work they've done. I liked all the other campaigns. No horror really in them, except for that little bit in Leon's at the start. I think the action mechanics are really perfected in this, and also the Mercenaries was really fun. I'll say it's a B tier. It's definitely a B tier. I liked it though. I did like it. Resi 7. I'll put that in S tier. It brought the series back to what it was. Back to its survival horror roots. Everyone's biggest complaint with this game mainly was Ethan, saying that it was a bit boring and all that, but I liked Ethan. He's just an average guy thrown into this monster house. I think he also got really redeemed in Resi Village as well, but this isn't about Ethan, this is about 7. It was just a great game, and like a great cast of characters. Like all of the Bakers were based off of like movie villains, I'm pretty sure, from 90s to 80s. I think that's what it was. I've heard that somewhere before. Chris didn't look like Chris, but I think he was still cool. I think this game has the best DLC in all of Resident Evil as well. And I think between like being the scariest in the series, having a great story, good characters, and amazing DLC, it just deserves to be an S tier. I want to try it in VR someday though. I feel like that's going to be the next level. I still need to try it. Code Veronica, A tier. Also controversial. I liked Code Veronica. It was different, yeah, but I found the story interesting. Obviously, we have Claire, we have Chris, Wesker makes his big return. We had the Ashford twins and all that. They were alright villains. And we had Steve, good old Steve. People found him annoying, I found him alright. I think it might have just been the scripting and him that let him down for most people. I wouldn't say it's the most horror-y Resident Evil game. Still fun though. One thing I did like was the Bandersnatch enemies. They were interesting in terms of how like they're kind of like budget tyrants. I don't know, I like the story. I did like the story. Code Veronica deserves an A in my opinion. Hopefully we get a remake someday, but I don't see it. Resident Evil Remake. I'm not ranking these in a specific order when I put them into their tiers, but this is getting put to top of S tier. This is peak Resident Evil. This is a perfect Resident Evil remake and a perfect remake altogether. Probably the best remake of all time, in my opinion. It's just flawless, I'll say that. It was a big step up from Resident Evil 1 on the PS1. It looks gorgeous because they used pre-rendered backgrounds, which allowed them to put more processing power into the actual character models. The story's amazing. It's everything from Resident Evil with more. It's a true survival horror experience. You will be having a great time. Sure, some people aren't a fan of fixed camera angles. I can understand that. But in this game, it would be hard to see it without them. It's perfect. It is just perfect. I can't say anything else, but it's perfect. Resident Evil Gun Survivor 2 Code Veronica. I haven't played this one either. This was an arcade machine game that then eventually came to the PS2. I don't actually own this on the PS2 yet. But from what I know, it's like really wacky. It's like a loose telling of Code Veronica, and then suddenly like Nemesis appears, which is interesting. And technically, even though it's like wacky as shit, it's like still canon because it takes place in a dream that Claire has. I don't know, it sounds wacky, but I haven't played it sadly, so I can't say anything about it. So it has to stick here with these three guys. Resident Evil 2. If the remake is up there, Resi 2 has to be up there. Resi 2 on the PS2 is my favorite PlayStation game. Did I say PS2? PS1. It's rare that you get a sequel that is better than the original, but Resident Evil 2 just fucking whacked it out of the park. Fantastic cast of characters, good voice acting, everything all in a nice, neat little package. Resi 4, we may have a problem here. A lot of them seem to be going into S tier. Resi 4 is a great action game, still holds up to this day. I still enjoy it more than the remake, but both are fantastic. This was really Leon's game. If you like a little action beat 'em up where you just go around shooting and kicking and suplexing people, this is the game. This is the game. But beware, your ears may never recover. Resident Evil Dead Aim. Haven't played it yet. Have it over on my little pile over here. I have a little pile of Resi games beside me. I want to make a video on it someday because it sounds really wacky. It's like an action movie in Resident Evil form. Well, we got 7 of those, but we're not talking about those. We don't talk about those. From what I'm aware, you follow an American spy that's been sent on some boat. There's another spy there. I don't know either of their names. This guy kind of looks like a Bruce, to be honest. And the main villain is some guy and then turns himself into a tyrant that can like shoot electricity, I think. It's one I really want to check out, and I do plan to make a video on it someday. Sadly, I can't rank it though. Another one I can't also rank is Resident Evil Gaiden. That is the Game Boy game. That features Barry and Leon, and they're on a ship again, I believe. Jesus, they love ships in this game. And from what I'm aware, there's like a bioweapon on it that can like change shape, and like, spoiler, Leon dies at the end or something. It's not a canon game, obviously, but it's interesting. I've seen the shooting mechanic on it, and it doesn't look that fun. But obviously, you have to work around with what the Game Boy hardware could provide. Resident Evil, I was close to putting it in A, but I might have to put it in S as well. This was the first ever Resident Evil game I played on the PlayStation Classic. The voice acting was really funny. I love the story. It's a great game. That's really all I can say for it. It's a good little survival horror experience, and without it, we wouldn't have had anything else on this list, so good job, little guy. Revelations. Ooh. I think it goes in A. This came out in like the midst of the Resident Evil action trilogy. This was a very horror-y focused game for most part. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of action in it, but it does have its horror elements. It's also got Jill, best character. We've got Chris, Parker, a lot of good characters in this, and a guy that looks like Conan O'Brien. I enjoyed it. Takes place on a ship again. Resident Evil loves their ships. I think the T-Phobos virus was pretty cool, and the final boss fight especially was actually really unique with the teleporting guy. It's a good story. I really enjoyed it. I haven't played it in a while now, but it was good. I actually have the DS one right here. But yeah, I think it definitely deserves an S tier. It's a good little game. One thing I will say though, it has a cliffhanger at the ending, like it's gonna have another game, but they never did anything with it. Maybe Revelations 3. Ooh. Speaking of Revelations 3, here's what it was meant to be. Resident Evil Village. I loved Village. Village was a great game. I haven't played it many times, but since it came out, I can still remember this game so vividly. Just like Resident Evil 7 had a fantastic list of characters, especially with our antagonists like Heisenberg, Lady Dimitrescu, and Mother Miranda. All such memorable characters with such unique personalities. Gameplay wise, fantastic. Ethan just being a badass, you know. Also got some really good DLC. I liked the Shadows of Rose DLC. I will say I found it weird that they ended off the Winters story here. I always thought it would carry over into the next game, like Rose being the main character of Resi 9. I had a lot of theories before the Shadows of Rose DLC was ever announced what Resi 9 would be, and a lot of them ended up happening in Shadows of Rose. And since Resident Evil kind of works in trilogies, being like the Raccoon trilogy, the Action trilogy, and then I thought this would have been like the Winters trilogy, but I feel like it's gonna just end up being like the first person trilogy. But still, I love this game. Good, not as horror-y as Resi 7, still fun to play. I'll say it can go in S tier. I liked it. And finally, Resident Evil 0. Resi 0, ooh. This game's a prequel to Resident Evil, or more specifically, Resident Evil's remake. Features Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen. It's a very game. I like it. Personally, I like it. If you liked Resident Evil Remake, I'd still give it a chance because it is very similar. The whole switching back and forth mechanic is cool, but it can be a bit tedious. I wasn't a fan that they got rid of the chest, so you couldn't really store things, you just had to leave them on the ground. That was a bit annoying. The train wasn't all that interesting because it's essentially run up, run down, run up, run down, run up, run down. I still did like the game though, it's just, yeah. The leeches and James Marcus clone and all that was a bit of a weird story, but yeah, I still liked it. The Leech Queen was still a cool boss. We got to see the T001 Tyrant, which was really cool. Overall, I'd say I'll put it in B. And yeah, that's it. All these games here I do plan to play, hopefully, maybe, on stream. If you would be interested in seeing me stream again, let me know. I would love to start getting back into and playing some Resi and other survival horror games. But for now, that is the list. That is my list. I think it's pretty reasonable. Obviously, it's all my personal opinion here. Let me know what you think of this list down below. Let me know where you'd put specific games yourself. And even, you know, send them to me over on Twitter or Instagram. I'm on those. I never actually plug shit on video, I always forget to. But yeah, I have those. But anyway, if you did like this video, please do give it a like. Maybe even drop a little subscription if you liked the video and any of the other videos I've put up. You know, there should be some popping up on screen now. I'm trying to get back into YouTube properly, and it would just be really appreciated. So thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Peace.